Stakeholders have expressed divergent views on the 100% failure rate that has been recorded at Mumena A Secondary School, where 38 pupils, grade 9 pupils, failed to progress to grade 10 at Mumena A Secondary School in northwestern province of Kalumbila district. And now tonight, this is the first edition of Topic Talk on Spring 24 TV. The 100% failure rate that has been recorded at Mumena A Secondary School has brought about different and divergent views from the stakeholders and in the education sector. And this has become the talk of the day. Others are heaping the blame on the teachers and others are heaping the blame on the learners. Today's topic of discussion on a Topic Talk, we're looking at the 100% failure rate that has been recorded at Mumena A Secondary School. Who is to blame? Joining me on today's edition is ZANEC Executive Director, Mr. George Hamusunga, who is going to give out his view on today's topic, and later on we'll be joined by a youth activist who is Mwape Musonda to give out his view. But before we get into our discussion, let's take a look at this clip.
Kafako bantanda muntu daruni nangomba kino bafane bashara sukuru yonse kupona ichikopa takwa ichikopa bantandao wonse bari kwatama nomba kuti bapona.
These are aggrieved grade 9 pupils of Mumena A Secondary School in Kalumbila district that have confirmed that they have failed their grade 9 examinations, and the pupils have attributed their poor performance to the poor work culture of the teachers at the school.
Pano katwa popela kya mama teacher onse the secondary school kuma skulu wangi turetere po ama teacher banyu
apa manje ndifa afi kubika kwa effort kufira fimi efyo na afiru kama fira fini ndifa kubika kwa effort na wiringa ko nkafishite wino kana pasa kufe mufiri fo.
Meanwhile, some parents state that they refuse to send their children to the school and instead transfer them due to fear that their children would fail their exams.
Muntu apusena bakoti bamo bansemi batwara mara bana bebafumya apo batwara ma transfer kuma skulu akwabo mambo opeke bene kufunjisha bulongo ni abe bantu mwanike tukora kumutsima yo tudziba nsemi kwesakanyana buyanzi wotwadzi kuyandanga na ukabakana na mwana namba ye ku school kuya kuranguruka mwana mwaka yense wapwa mwana uno ya ku school twatwera mwaka wabuzi mwana uno ya ku school kufika padzo dzadziwa dza kulemba mbabana bose badaro bapona mwaniki tukora kumutsima.
And Parents Teacher Association member has an appeal for government.
Misamirishe ya teachers taiweme tabareposa kwa mano awe nokubomfya mashu yakwe bati kiri kuri iwe wewe urerisha kusambirira inena alisambirira kare so kanshi paria bari ubafya bukarama.
The question remains, who is to blame? Is it the parents, the teachers, or the children? Klunga Sachuka, S24.
Welcome back, and now before we get into it, my first guest on today's edition of Topic Talk is a Zambia National Education Coalition Executive Director, Mr. George Hamusunga. Good evening, welcome to the show.
Good evening, thank you so much.
Now, Mr. George Hamusunga will help us to digest on this topic of discussion that we have at hand tonight, which is the 100% failure record that has been recorded at Mumena A Secondary School, where 38 pupils, the grade 9s of course, failed to progress to grade 10 after failing their exams. This is the topic of discussion that we have tonight on today's Topic Talk. Now, let's get into it. What is your comment on the 100% failure rate at Mumena Secondary School?
Well, it is really a disaster. And we are very, very disappointed that our learners can spend, 9 years in school without anything to show for it. And as education stakeholders, we really need to introspect and ensure that such a situation does not happen again. When you look at what we are getting in terms of the information that we've been able to gather, this is a day school where children, for instance, are moving from home to school every day. This is a school where, for instance, our learners have complained that they have not been learning. Of course, that is from the side of the learners. And this is a school, really, which, if you look at the information that we have received now, it's a school that is not very rural. So we can't say that they are lacking anything to be able to ensure that learning takes place, because the failure rate that we have received is a signal, really, that there was no learning that was taking place.
Now, you've mentioned that the school is not that rural, meaning that you're giving that picture of saying that the school is doing quite better in terms of facility, the school facility, and the learning materials. What do you attribute the failure to as ZANEC?
Well, as ZANEC, we attribute that to the fact that management did not do their job. The school management has a responsibility to ensure that learning is taking place. And where learning is not taking place, the school management is supposed to take action. But in this situation where we write exams and we see that our learners have failed without any one of them passing, then it becomes a source of concern. So we are actually putting all the blame on management, because the school management are the ones that are supposed to, for instance, ensure that learners are getting the tests when they are supposed to get the tests, and learners are being examined on things that are going to, maybe come in the exams. And when they fail, they are supposed to ensure that there are remedial measures that teachers are taking into action to ensure that they remediate on the gaps that they are seeing in the learners. So there is no question whatsoever about who is responsible. The issue here is that the school lacks management. So the school management there needs to be held accountable for what has happened.
Now, some stakeholders have attributed this failure to the automatic progression policy. Are you also in view of the same attribution?
Well, no, the automatic progression affects the entire country. So there's no way we can find that, the whole country, we have only one school where children have failed. So there are weaknesses, there are local weaknesses at that school that go beyond that. But of course, we are not in support of the automatic progression on the basis that, if you do an exam and some people do not perform well and you let them progress, what you are saying is that the exam does not matter. What exams are there for is to inform us of the gaps so that we can remediate those gaps. And this is why previously people who fail needed to repeat, and repeating was a way of remediating the gap that they have found in the competencies of those learners before they move to another grade. But what is happening now really to the school we are discussing now is purely an internal matter that needs to be addressed. And I must say that the way we address this should not involve transferring teachers. Those teachers should not be transferred. We have heard that they have qualified teachers. Most of them have degrees, others have diplomas, meaning that they can teach. We want these teachers now to start demonstrating that they can do better. And that's why we want them to remain at the school.
Now, you've mentioned of the management being one of the contributors to this failure by the 38 pupils at Mumena Secondary School, the grade 9 pupils who failed to progress to grade 10. Did you carry out an investigation to find out what really was going on between the management and that relationship between the pupils and teachers?
Well, the only thing we've gotten is that, pupils used to be playing in the grounds most of the time. They go to school, they don't write any notes. They would go back home, and the time is going. And as you know, we had the COVID-19, so we didn't have the luxury of time. meaning that we had little time which we needed to utilize, effectively in order to prepare our children to be able to write. But unfortunately, this did not happen because this is a school where this little time that they had to interact with the learners and they try to ensure that they remediate on the lost time, they decided, not to take advantage. And we see that these learners, were learning almost nothing. And it is hoped that even the Teaching Council of Zambia is going to move in, because it's very unprofessional. There is no way you can be giving certificates to people who neglect their duty. And that is not what teachers are doing the whole country. This is just unique to that school. And even if we speak for teachers, we will not shield those teachers who really abdicated their duty to be able to do the work for which they are paid, on monthly basis.
And now going back to automatic progression policy, you've said that you are not of the view of this policy. Can you justify that?
Well, the automatic progression policy, you might wish to know that the exams for grade 7 are not printed in the country. They are printed outside the country at a huge cost. That's one of them. 2, from grade 1 up to grade 7, we don't have a major exam. So children move from one grade to another on the basis of having clocked a year. If you have been in grade 1 for 1 year, then you need to go in grade 2 for another year, without them, examining you on the competencies, whether you have achieved all the competencies of a grade 1 for you to progress to grade 2. So grade 7 becomes the only exam that we try to assess our learners. Of course, we have tests that are supposed to be administered in most of the schools by way of policy, but those are not being administered. Now, we have this one exam. It comes to this pupil to assess whether they can speak English or not, whether they are able to write English or not. And we ignore the results that come out of it. It becomes a problem because, for instance, now the statistics show that only 5% of the grade 7 or the 15-year-olds demonstrate proficiency in reading and writing, or they can, in simple language, they can, only 5% of grade 7 pupils can, for instance, read and understand a simple passage. Now, if you have examined and that is what is saying, what is supposed to happen is that you have to concentrate on teaching these learners on how to read and write. Because literacy or reading and writing is the key to other subjects. You can't pass, geography if you don't know how to read. You can't pass mathematics if you don't know how to read.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Hamusunga. We'll later on bring you back on say so that you can justify further your point. And unfortunately, your 10 minutes is done for you to justify your opinion on this particular matter. Later on, we'll be joined by our second guest, who is the youth activist, Mr. Mumena. Later on, we'll be joined by him. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And before we went on a break, we were talking to ZANEC Executive Director George Hamusunga, who shared his views on the 100% failure rate at Mumena A Secondary School of Kalumbila District in Northwestern Province. Now, to look at this topic from a different angle and perspective, we are joined by a youth activist who is Mumena. Good evening and welcome to Topic Talk.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all viewers.
Much, thank you. And now let's get into this. What is your comment on the 100% failure rate at Mumena A Secondary School?
Yeah, I think my comment will be as much as the same as everyone else's in the country. I think it's a very big disappointment that a school can record 100% failure of all the learners who write the exams. The idea behind writing exams is to assess whether the learners are grasping what is being given to them by the teachers. And as far as possible, there is a lot of expenses that go into educating these learners. So if we are going to record failure at this rate, it means that government is going to lose a lot of resources to educate the nation. We can't have a situation where everyone who writes an exam fails. That's very expensive. It's like you have a hospital and all the patients who go there, they fail to get healed and they die. That's the situation that happened at Mumena school. We cannot allow that to go on because one, government will lose a lot of resources in terms of funds, and two, government also lose a lot of resources in terms of human resource, because the idea behind educating children is that when they grow up, they should be able to be the labor force of our country. So it's very, very disappointing, and it's one of the things that we would want to move on quickly from. That the next time they are going to, the pupils from any school, not just Mumena, the next time pupils are going to write exams, we should not be in a situation where we record 100% failure.
Mope, other stakeholders have attributed the failure to the automatic progression policy that was introduced. Are you also of the same view?
I don't support that school of thought 100%, because I mean there are a lot of factors that led to the pupils failing. But I think from my take, the culprits to blame in this instance are the teachers. It's not the automatic progression. The automatic progression in itself is actually a very good system, in my view, because in this country, if we look at the average educated person, it's grade 9. So the idea behind the automatic progression is that we can provide a wider platform, or a wider platform for learners to have at least get to grade 9. If you go in the rural setup, in the rural areas of our country, you find that majority of the children there, once they get to grade 7, they fail to pass the grade 7 exam. That's it. They go out there and they start living life. So the idea that learners should automatically progress is actually a good thing, so that learners are able to at least get up to grade 9 before they can leave school. The reason why I blame the teachers is that the teacher should be able to assess the children. The teachers who are teaching these learners, they knew, because government has introduced a system of continuous assessment. So the teachers, when they were teaching these kids, these learners, they were able to assess and see that these children are not going to make it, they are not going to pass. When you are teaching, whether it's primary school, whether it's university or high school, as a teacher, you should be able to assess that, what am I giving to my learners? Are they getting what I'm giving them? If you are able to assess like that, then you would know, you would automatically predict that everyone is going to fail. So I think, in my view, in my opinion, the ones who failed are the teachers. The teachers should have been able to assess. The teacher, as you are, if you are teaching 1 + 1, the whole year you have been teaching 1 + 1, and then no kid in class is able to get the answer correct, then you are preparing for disaster. You have to assess, and if it's not working, you have to change the formula so that you are able to help these kids learn. So I don't blame it on the automatic progression. Instead, I think the teachers should shoulder the majority of the blame. Of course, there are other factors. Maybe we haven't heard from the teachers themselves. Maybe if they explain to us, they will be able to, they can give us reasons as to why. But for now, we are looking at this from afar. And from my point of view, I think the teachers have got, maybe if it's, I think it should be 80% of the blame for the failure.
You have heaped the blame on teachers. Can you kindly justify further that that point? Does it mean that the people hired these teachers, because we do believe that for teachers to be assigned, they undergo a certain process for them to be assigned for this particular job? Do you think that the people who assigned these teachers, they didn't do their job? because you're heaping the blame on the teachers.
Absolutely not. I can't blame the people who hire the teachers. I think in this country, public schools or government schools, as it were, have got some of the most qualified teachers. If you look at the situation right now, a majority of the teachers, on average, they all have diplomas. And these diplomas, and you know, the requirement for grade 12 certificate for everyone else in the country has just been proliferated now because of politics. But otherwise, for the teachers who work in government schools, for a long time they have been required to possess the grade 12 certificate. So if you go to an average government school, you find that majority of the teachers have got grade 12 certificates, and they are very qualified. So when they are being employed, even now, when you look at the teachers who are being registered by the teaching council, they scrutinize them, they screen them. If the teacher doesn't have grade 12 certificate, they find it hard to be able to be selected by the teaching council. So the ones who employed them, the teaching council, I can't blame them. I can't fault them.
But why do you put the blame on teachers if they have the qualifications?
It should be negligence now. It's negligence of duty. I gave an example that if I have a class and I'm teaching the whole year, I'm teaching 1+1, and no pupil in my class is able to give me a correct answer from January to December, then I make the kids write the exam. Then definitely I know what will happen. The result will be known. So I can't blame the ones who employed them. They did their job, because for a government school teacher to be employed, it's a rigorous process. You have to be qualified. You cannot produce a fake grade 12 certificate. You cannot produce a fake diploma, because teaching council will take those qualifications to the higher education qualifications authority, and your papers will be scrutinized there. If they are fake, then you will be found wanting. It's a criminal offense. So I'm very sure that the people who employed these teachers did a good job, but the teachers themselves, they are the ones who have failed us.
Well, Mr. Msonda, thank you so much for your your view and your point on that particular item.
Thank you very much.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time for you to justify your point, but later on we'll be joined by Mr. Hamusunga later on, so that this debate can go further. And let's hear what really happened and what could be the possible solution so that this predicament, or rather this situation, shouldn't repeat itself in the near future. For now, I'm joined by my two guests, Mr. Hamusunga and Mr. Musonda, to continue this topic of discussion. The topic of discussion on our today's topic talk is the 100% failure rate that has been recorded at Mumena Secondary School, where all the 38 pupils, grade 9 pupils who sat for their exams, and they failed to progress to grade 10. This is the topic of discussion that we're looking at, and some stakeholders describe this situation as an academic taboo. And now, to continue with our discussion, I'm joined by our two guests to justify further their opinions and their contributions and views on this particular topic. To start the discussion, Mr. Hamusunga, from what we have gathered, the Kalumbila District Education Board suggested that an investigation has and will be launched to ascertain what led to the poor performance by pupils at Mumena Secondary School. Do you think this is the right thing to do?
Well, it is, but you see, the way they are putting it as if it requires a study to be done. It's just collecting the facts from the schools to know what was happening. And it's something that the DEBS is able to provide within a day. There is no need of using scientific methods of research to arrive at the truth, because the truth is in the open. So they simply need to write an official report, which the public can be informed and use to make their opinion. The fact is that they know what happened, and they just need to give us an official position regarding what they know.
Now, coming back to you, Mwape, what is your opinion on this particular suggestion? Is it the right thing to do to carry out an investigation?
Like Mr. Hamsunga said, definitely the investigation is very welcome, but it doesn't require rocket science for you to determine what really happened. It should be something that should be done. I mean, the results are out there in the open already for everyone to see. There's no need for us to waste a lot of time. The responsible parties in this particular case are the teachers and the management. So it shouldn't, we shouldn't, in this country we like doing investigations. Huh? Oh, a commission of inquiry has been instituted and it takes 1 year for you to get the results. This is a straightforward matter. Whatever happened at that school, we have seen that there was gross negligence on the part of the teachers, as well as the head teacher and whoever was responsible in charge of that school. They literally dropped the ball. They didn't do anything. And to make matters worse, they didn't even prepare. When you are given a job and you know that you can't do it, it's better you come out in the open and say, I can't do this job. I've failed. But they laid on the pupils, the whole country, up to the exam, and they knew. When they knew, maybe they should have we shouldn't have wasted that paper, the stationery that we used on the children, on the learners, because they knew the results. The teachers knew that this is what was going to happen. It was going to be a disaster.
Now, I'll pose this question, another question again. Should the investigations be carried out on the management? You heap the blame on the management and you heap the blame on the teachers. Should the investigation be carried out on the management and the teachers to try to find out if the management has all the qualifications to carry out all the activities and the examinations at this particular school? I'll come back to you later. You can answer that question.
Yes, it's important that they also assess managements, because we've heard, for instance, of complaints among some teachers regarding the promotion, of some teachers to some positions, such as head teacher positions, that sometimes it's not done transparently or it's not done objectively. It would be important also to see, whether the management there have the capacity to manage a school in a manner that the school can deliver quality education. But we want also to extend the investigation to look at the way forward. These are children that have lost an opportunity. What are we doing about it? It is not their fault. That we must know is not their fault. So we expect the investigations also to give recommendations on the remedial measures. What is going to be done to remedy the situation? That is very important.
I'll come back to you, Mzonda Mwampe. Is it right to carry out an investigation to try to find out the qualifications of the teachers that you heap the blame on?
Yeah, like I said earlier, of course, it will be important to establish the actual qualifications for these particular teachers. But I'm very confident that these teachers have got a qualification, unless we are saying that we don't trust the teaching council and how it employs the teachers. Because as far as we are concerned as a nation, we have got a teaching council which is responsible for recruiting all the teachers in the country. And there is vigorous screening at the council there for you to be employed. So in my opinion, investigating their qualification, not really investigating, but to ask them to produce their qualification. Because definitely if we went to the teaching council, we will find a copy of the certificates for all the teachers who are there, including that of the head teacher and his entire management team. We will find those papers. Unless they were employed in a corrupt way, then again now we will be shifting the spotlight to be on the teaching council. But in this case, we are trying to focus on the school. So yes, it will be important to investigate, but I would say not to investigate, but to ask the teachers to produce their certificates, because they do have, I trust that they do have. they have the papers.
Now, in an event whereby they have all the qualifications and the same scenario happens again in the near future, what could be what could be the lasting solution to this situation?
Yeah, for me, I think even immediately before we even go into the future, these teachers they need to have some form of punishment for what they have done, for the gross negligence that they did to ensure that the pupils failed. So immediately after the investigation is done, they are told to produce their papers and everything. I think there should be some form of punishment so that they, not really to dismiss them, no, but there should be some form of punishment that should be meted so that it can play as a stop shot for other teachers to be negligent in the manner that these teachers were at Mumena. So there should be some form of punishment that should be meted out on these teachers, including the management of the school.
What form of punishment would you suggest to be implemented on them?
Well, I'm not in the position to recommend. I'm sure the teaching council has got the disciplinary code of conduct and everything, and in that document there is what stipulates a punishment that can be meted. But I would anyway, I would suggest, I would urge that the teaching council should, using their documents, make some form of punishment so that it would serve as a deterrent to any other teaching professional who wants to neglect their duty and cost the country colossal sums of money to educate, and then the learners don't get anything at the end of the year.
Now, going back to you, Mr. Hamusunga, should the investigation be carried out and in an event you find out that the management that you've heaped the blame on has all the qualifications, what could be the lasting solution that you would suggest so that it can be implemented? And if there's any lasting solution and the same situation happens again, what could be any sort of disciplinary action that would take?
Well, as of now, we are heaping the blame on management, and we would want to see that the investigation actually, finds out whether management was actually doing their duty of supervising learning within the school and of ensuring that, the learners are being assessed and prepared for the exam, because that's their responsibility. And also of ensuring that these managers assigned the right teachers to teach the examination, classes. And that is very, very important. We also, and if you have asked the question, if this continues, we would really want government, first and foremost, what we are saying is that these teachers must remain, or this school must remain in the spotlight. The teachers must remain at that school. We want to see them earn their income now, going forward. We don't want them to be transferred, because transferring is transferring a problem. They will continue to be on the spotlight, and we want to ensure that they remain in these schools and they demonstrate that they can do better than what they are giving us now. And as you can see, this is an isolated case, meaning that all the teachers in the country really are doing very well. But these are giving us a wrong example of what teachers are supposed to be doing. So we really need to do that. But should this continue, the blame is going to be shifted on the District Education Board Secretary. The DEBS now knows the weaknesses that are in that school. He has no excuse. He has to fix things and ensure that that school starts performing like other schools.
Mm-hmm. And now, is there any kind of suspicion on this matter, anything like foul play over this?
No, there's nothing whatsoever.
And now, following the advent of free education that has been introduced by the new Dawn government, the UPND government, don't you think this situation will be worse because of the advent of free education? and of course, a number of pupils will go high. And looking at the number of pupils at Mumena Secondary School is only 38. And now teachers didn't do their best according to your argument and your attribution to this failure. Don't you think that the number of teachers rather will be overwhelmed with the number of pupils?
Yeah, that is very true. Free education can be very dangerous if you don't provide for it. And we have seen a surge in the number of learners that have gone in schools because of the removal of fees. What we are saying is that, we are happy that government has sent, money to the schools in form of the free education grant. But what we are saying is that school managements are very key in ensuring that they manage the challenges that will come as a result of the surging number of learners in the schools. And this would include, school management coming up with measures that will ensure that the delivery of quality education continues. Some of the schools, because of, increase in the number of learners, will require to establish, for instance, double streams. Some will be required, for instance, to ensure that they recruit volunteer teachers. Some will require that they work with the local, communities to ensure that they put up infrastructure together so that they can decongest the classrooms, especially that now learning is happening amidst the COVID-19. So you are right. If we do not provide adequate inputs of quality as a result of the pronouncement of free education, that has seen, for instance, we are getting reports that some children are moving from private schools to public schools. Some children, for instance, that were out of school for a long time are going back to school. So meaning the numbers are increasing. So we need to manage that. And all that requires a very effective, management that is innovative to ensure that the environment continues to deliver quality education.
And I'll come back to you, Mwampe. Do you think the advent of free education will also be, or might be one of the contributors to the, if possible, another 100% failure rate?
Yeah, it can be very true. When you have a small population, what happens is that there are things that you wouldn't want to happen, they will happen in that smaller population. But when you increase the population, it means that you have just increased. Maybe if the percentage of failure was 10% in a group of 100, and then you go to a group of 500, 1,000, the 10% will also grow. So if you had 10 people failing, you are likely going to have 100 people failing if you have 1,000 people. So, like Mr. Armstrong has said, the key is in, I don't know if is it the Teaching Council or the Ministry of Education. They need to come up with a very strong monitoring and evaluating department within the ministry, so that you are able to monitor the quality of the education that is being provided in these public schools, because there is a very likelihood that the quality will drop. If a teacher was having 10 pupils or 20 pupils per class, because of free education, there will be a big increase. You'll find that those pupils who dropped off from school will go back to school, and maybe a teacher will have from 20, maybe they'll have 60 pupils in class. So without having a very strong monitoring department, either by the Teaching Council or from the Ministry of Education, it will actually lead to a disaster. So for us, on our part as young people, we would want to call on the Ministry of Education, General Education, to ensure that they establish a very strong monitoring department so that we can monitor the quality of the education that the learners are going to be getting. Without that, what we witness is that there will be more failure than what we have witnessed in Mumena. So let there be, that department is supposed to be very strong, so that there should be feedback I'm sure now the teachers will be able to give feedback within the first term. They will assess what's happening and let that feedback come so that remedial measures can be put in place by the relevant authorities so that we see that those disasters that are about to happen, they can be averted. Yeah.
In case you've just joined us, you are watching Topic Talk on Spring TV. Now today's topic, we're looking at the 100% failure rate that has been recorded at Mumena Area Secondary School, where 38 pupils, the grade 9 38 pupils, have failed to progress to grade 10. And my guest is Mr. Hamusunga from Zanek and Mr. Mwapemson, who is the youth activist. They're giving out their opinions on this particular topic of discussion. But before we let you go, before we conclude our discussion, what could be your recommendation on this trend so that this taboo, according to what Nakez has described it as academic taboo, shouldn't be repeated in the near future? I'll start with you.
Well, one of the recommendations is what Mr. Msonda has said, monitoring. We expect the standards officers from the Ministry of Education, for instance, to be monitoring frequently, because the monitoring is very, very important. The value of free education actually will come from how we are able to monitor, identify the teething problems, and address them immediately. If that doesn't happen, then we will see that free education actually is going to be toxic, because there's no need for us to give free education of poor quality. If we are doing that, we are like killing the masses. We need to give, free education of good quality, and we'll only do that if we continuously invest in monitoring what is happening in the classrooms and being able to address those challenges as we go along.
Your recommendation?
Yeah. I think, like Mr. Amsonga said, very, very important. Monitoring should be priority, because if you, if we don't, it will be a disaster. We have Mumenas in a thousand-fold. There will be a lot of those Mumenas. So we need to ensure that, in as much as the education is provided for free, the quality is maintained. It's like they say that they are offering free meal meal, or free meal meal, maybe whatever company is providing free meal meal, and then when you get there, you find that the meal meal is rotten. So are you going to get that? Is that going to be good for you? So we need to ensure that the quality of the free education is tip-top so that it can be beneficial to the country as we move along. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming through, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming through. That's where we've come to the end of our program. On today's Topic Talk, we're talking about the 100% fair rate, which has been recorded at Mumena Area Secondary School, where 38 pupils recorded the 100% fair rate in the fails to progress to grade 10. That's all we could accommodate on our today's Topic Talk. See you next time, and thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.